All righty, we are live with the Act 1 and 2 tour roundtable. What I'm gonna do is introduce these folks, because you know what the good book say. The good book say when two or more are gathered in the name of funktivity, funky things will happen. So that's what's about to go down. Let me give you a quick shout of who are here. First, we got first brother Law, brother LAW. He should write a book on how to make a living as a working musician while working with just about every industry outlet and every musician that y'all love, including Morris Day, George Clinton, Rick James, Fishbone, and every artist that's ever been on Solid Gold and Soul Train. Next, we got Marc Wiggins, aka Big Sexy, and like Brother Law, Brother Wiggins is one of those people who kept getting back in the line when God was disseminating talents, cause my lazy trifling ass was under the tree sleep somewhere. He's worked with Journey, Santana, Night Ranger. Don't act like y'all asses wasn't jamming the Sister Christian all summer 1984. He's the perfect example that humans must master their body and their mind, having been a professional wrestler, an NFA contract negotiator, a member of the Grammy Academy, and a member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar Association. And Big Sexy, I feel you on the American Dream. Dusty Rose. Me and you gonna have to talk about the American Dream one day. Third is Brother Ricky White. This brother got more talent than Andre Crabtree got holes on the golf court. He's a bassist, a graphic novelist, a history teacher, a contributor to the grown folks music, and a graduate of Virginia State University. HBCU in the house. That's right. The blacker the college, the sweeter the knowledge. Fourth is Hasit Shah. He is one of the most cosmopolitan persons that I know, as his articles always center humanity in a global place of chaos and disorder. He's an editor at Quartz, a research fellow at Harvard, a former senior producer at BBC, and a writer whose work always asks us what are we thinking as seriously as we should be. And finally, Brother Nicolay is a multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, producer, and DJ whose major contribution to music is being what I like to call a philosophical phonics specialist, in which he uses sound to challenge how people hear notes, which forces them to examine their personal relationship with music. Co-founder of the Foreign Exchange, writer and producer of several albums, and a Grammy-nominated artist who's worked with with many artists on every corner of the world. That gets it going. So come on now, let's get funky. So the first question I want to ask, just as a general, we're going to go round the horn. Let's start with y'all giving me y'all memories and perceptions of Act 1. And we're going to keep them separate. We're going to discuss Act 1 first and then do Act 2 second. So go around the horn. I'll start with Brother Watt and then everybody just jump in. Give me your initial perceptions of Act 1 tour.
My initial perception, I think like anybody at that particular time, especially into the U.S., we were excited Prince was touring. Because we hadn't seen him since Love Sexy. So, when we got word that tickets were going on sale, it was the place to be that time. So I thought it was great, man. So like anyone that knows me knows that I'm a band person. I've always been a band person. So I was equally excited to finally see the NPG live. I was curious to hear this new material live and Diamonds and Pearls stuff live. And then I thought they did a great job, like bringing out some of the older stuff. I thought with the horns, that was a great addition because, like we had Eric and say Atlanta, but this was an extended horn section. So like this was great. Like musically, I thought it was a growth from, again, like what we had saw in 88. This was 93, like 92, 93. So I thought it was great, man. So but I know we joke about the the Game Boys era, say with them. I thought the interaction was great. I mean again, so at that time, I mean like everybody, I think I was just excited just to kind of see him live again, and I know to see what he had in 93 that he didn't have in 88. So that's my take on it.
Very good, very good. Somebody else jump in right quick.
Shall I go? I really didn't at the time. I had sort of fallen off of my fandom, to be completely honest, because at the time I had actually gone from listening to Prince to listening like hip hop on the one hand and I would say more like guitar driven music on the other hand, like stuff like Fishbone, stuff like Living Color, 24/7 Spies. And so like what I know of the tours is kind of from hindsight, from being interested as when my fandom sort of recovered, which was around 95. And then from there on out until now. So everything that I know from the era is looking back. That said, I would make the point that it's probably the most interesting Prince tour in his career, perhaps peerless in the sense that it just had so much going on behind the scenes, and I think it influenced both the tour, but also just everything that sort of happened in his career afterwards. You know, you had essentially the Come album being developed, I think, in front of people's eyes. Even if they didn't know it at the time, you know, he would play early versions of Come songs before these American shows, you know, in I think March and April, like the earliest version of Come, and I think a couple of more. And then obviously during the after shows, which I would make the point are probably the more interesting shows of the tour. You know, like there's a legendary one in Chicago where he was sick. I mean, I think he was sick for a portion of the tour, but he was really sick during I think the run up north. And the Chicago show, I mean, he literally is hoarse, and it's just kind of, it's incredible that he's still doing a 2-hour show and he's like sick. He's doing a 2-hour show after the show. You know what I mean? But there's a San Francisco after show that is phenomenal. So I think, I mean, it, you know, this is an era where I'll be very honest to say I'm a fan of the era, not necessarily because of the music, even though the after shows are phenomenal and the musicianship is incredible, and but the main shows to me are not necessarily sort of the what draws me in here. I'm a fan of just the times. I'm a fan of just the fact that he had just recorded The Undertaker, or was working on that. Along the way, this conflict with Warner started to play out, the name change. So it was an incredibly, probably crazy, but looking back, incredibly inspiring era that also was documented really well, you know, in these photo books by Terry Giedison and others. And so it, you know, we just have a lot of even like, and video, you know what I'm saying? There's the official after show in London, which we'll speak about later, I think, with the Act 2. But there's just a lot of documentation of the tours. So at this point, we kind of really see, you know, what he's trying to do, you know, and I think, again, it's a super, super exciting time. Maybe, you know, at the time I wasn't really in like looking for Prince at all. So again, this is me just looking back now, just appreciating sort of the career as a whole. This was a for real a turning point, you know, for real sort of like end of one era and the beginning of another.
Very good. Somebody else jump on in there.
All right, I'll go. Two quick initial memories come to my mind. First of all, I'm wearing this mask. I had some dental work done, real deep dental work, so I'm sparing you guys the damages as we work through this.
Oh man.
For that concert, this was 30 years ago, I actually got my tickets by spending the night online outside of the record store to get my tickets. See, all you youngins, y'all don't know. It was not point and click like it is now. You know, I went out there and put the work in, got my tickets, and the night of the show, I saw it in San Francisco. And we're going to talk about the show a lot, obviously, but what stuck in my mind initially and to this day, and I've told him this many times, Michael Bland's drum tone was like a punch in the ribs. It was amazing. I had never heard anything like that. I never got to see John Bonham play with Zeppelin, but I had never heard a drum tone like this ever. And for the whole night, he's just kicking me in the ribs like, yeah, this is what I want to see. And the show was great. And this is the first time I've ever seen any artist have no opening act. You know, he hit the stage, did one set, took a 15-minute break, came out and tore it up again. I had never seen that before. And I was not aware, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was not aware of the after shows. I know. Because had I known, I'd have been all up in that. And he brought people up on stage during Get On Up. I'm like, why am I not on stage? you know. But editor's note, I did figure that out at musicology. Know the story. So it was a great show. I had a blast musically. It was amazing. Honestly, I have been critical of the rap segments, but Tony and the Game Boys did their thing that night. I can't lie. You know, it was a fantastic show all the way around. And we can get into definite song selection and how they presented themselves and whatnot as we go on. But yeah, what stands out most is Mr. Michael Bland, big man with the big beat, and the snare drum just kicking me in the ribs all night that night.
Mm.
Very good. Somebody else jump right on in there. Appreciate you, Big Sexy.
For me, you know, Prince is the epitome of evolution. So unlike most fans, everywhere he went, I went. And because he had incorporated hip hop at the start of the Diamonds and Pearls thing going into the Symbol era, it was just, you know, I expressed this the last time we came into this forum, whereas for me as a singer and an MC and a musician, it compacted all together. And I think for Act 1 and 2 for the tours, just to see it live, because you got to remember when we saw that classic Arsenio Hall performance where, you know, he opens up with "My Name is Prince" and burns the critics' review of the album and everything, because we felt the same way he did at that particular point. So I'm like, well, what are they listening to? Because what I'm hearing here is an album that to me was way better than Diamonds and Pearls, in my opinion. And the whole structure of it, the whole, you know, the whole Egyptology thing that he was bringing into it, the Arabian sound effects, Maite being added on. And even though I definitely, you know, Rosie Gaines was definitely missed. Let's not get it twisted.
Right.
That's the one thing I missed about, you know, in that particular realm. Once she was gone, there was a certain presence that was left. But I felt like in that particular setting, they had all the right tools. So to complement what the rest of the fellas are saying, I mean, when you got Michael B on drums and Sonny and Levi and Tommy and the Game Boys, like that's, you know, for me, it was like the full spectrum. I'm like, Prince has finally gotten to a point where he's bringing in even more influences that we hadn't really seen in the last probably couple of albums, because we know what to expect from Prince, but we don't know what to expect. That's the beauty of who he is. So the thing is that when this came about for someone like me, who is a real hip hop head, it just was like, damn, like this is the whole, the routines. They was doing the typhoon, even the gear, you know, the gear's always been what it's been, but there was even a certain extra regal effect in this tour, even with the clothes that he wore. And then with the whole 3 chains of gold concept, you know, with the microphone gun and all that stuff. Like it to me, it was captivating in every single facet for me. So when we went to go see the show, you gotta remember, I was all, like I said earlier, I was all in. Like for me, you couldn't tell me nothing around that period. It was really like, you know, from everything that we would count on for them to do live, and then to add on to the other stuff. Plus, there was the whole Carmen Electra thing. Then there was the Ride Divine special. Remember that on ABC? That stayed up all night. And just to see Troy Bayer and her fine self like that, just the whole, like you said, it was well documented. Like everything was flowing together in that whole synergy of what he was doing. So I was all in, and I was following Prince everywhere he went. I was just curious to really just see, like, where's he going to go from here? Like, where's he going to go from this point on? So
very good, brother. Go ahead, brother. See.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to Act 1 because Act 2 was the only one that came to Europe, but I'd never been to a Prince show, and you know, I was 15 years old. All I knew about Act 1 was reading stuff in the NME or Rolling Stone and Mojo, and I couldn't wait for the London show. And back then, Europeans and Americans, I mean, people around the world in general, didn't see the same stuff. We didn't have access to the same things because of the no internet. So things like Arsenio, I didn't know about till much, much later on. So the level of excitement was very different. He'd played shows in the UK more recently as well. But again, I was too young for all that stuff. I can talk more about Act 2 because that's the one I actually went to, but I can say this: I'll never, ever be more excited about any concert or album, because at that time, I was a brand new Prince fan. fully on board and developing the obsession. I hadn't even heard a lot of the old stuff. I hadn't heard, say, Dirty Mind or things that, I should know. Well, I of course know about now, but things that were canon to many of you, I didn't know that stuff. Mm-hmm. So Act 2 is when I heard some songs for the very first time, and I'll talk about that a bit later.
Okay. And I'll say also, brother, see, also as we're doing the discussion on Act 1, you can feel free to discuss, like, as you've seen bootlegs, because like I haven't seen, I wasn't there in Europe for Act 2, but I've seen damn near all of them on bootleg. And I'll just say this: I don't know if this tells you how Prince felt about bootlegs, but the very first conversation we ever had about my book when I walked into Paisley Park, the first thing he ever said to me is like, "Somebody got a lot of bootlegs." Literally the first word that he said, and all I could say was, brother, research purposes. That's what it's for. I hate to take away, but somebody put something in the comment, and I guess people not as old as me. I gave Big Sex a shout out when I said American Dream. People who know I was referring to Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream. That's why see that everybody know so for those who don't know, Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, was an American wrestler, and he was the whitest black man I had ever seen in my life. I didn't know other white men who talked like Dusty Rhodes and the American Dream. So that's what that is. All right, so now I want to get back on topic. So I was disappointed that the electric chair was not played during the nude tour. So can you guys tell me what songs or arrangements are missing from the Love Symbol album that you wish would have been included in Act 1? Go ahead, Brother Wyatt.
First off, I want to give it, back to something Brother Law said that kind of led up, I know, to the tour. Two major things. One was the Ride Divine performance, which was on a major network, which was fantastic. Which at that time, so a lot of people, like radio wasn't really giving Prince that love, and video channels kind of weren't. But for him to get a major spot on ABC, that was great. The other thing, two other things. One was being Tower Records. And then for those of us who remember Tower Records stayed open to 12 midnight. Tower Records had a book section, or say a magazine section, that carried this very rare fan magazine called like Uptown. And if you were, fortunate enough to get Uptown, shout out to Pierre Nelson and Dwayne. You got a lot of reviews of certain things, so that kind of got you, kind of kept you updated. The other thing was the Arsenio performance that was mentioned, and I'm gonna tell you, when they did, I think it was the Max and that vamp at the end that carried out the show to the credits. Woo! That was fire. That one was that alone was enough to make you want to go say, okay, I gotta go see the show. Now, the only song that I think that was missing that I would have liked to have heard during the show, probably "And God Created Woman." I would have loved to see how they would have done that. That would have been classic to kind of see how they did. I think everything else, I think he kind of did. We saw at least some type of live version of. But I really hate that they didn't do "And God Created Woman," but that version of the Max where they vamped that out and carry that, that was whew.
For me, I've been watching some recent.
Camila, y'all would get that version.
I've been watching some recent footage, and he didn't do Blue Light in San Francisco, and I mean, I was okay with it because obviously it's not my show, but that was, to me, that was offset by a moment in the concert when they're doing Continental, and at the end of the song, as the lights are dimming, he said, "Ladies, don't be afraid to tell your man how you need to be done." Every woman in the building, including me, I won't lie, I gave it up. It was amazing. It would have fit, he didn't do "And God Created Woman" with us either, but they were missed, but they weren't glaring omissions, He got in Morning Papers, which is what I was really there to hear. He got in My Name is Prince. He got in Sexy MF. And every time I hear Sexy MF, I think of the opening of the video. You, get in the car. You know? So there was so much he put in. And in the second part of the show, he went into his catalog and just blew the building into bits. It was amazing. But yeah, he did not do Blue Light. And I can see it on YouTube that he did do it in other locations, but he didn't do it in San Francisco.
All right. Somebody else? Someone in there.
I mean, I would argue that it's kind of going back to, I think it was Lowe who said, like, it was not so much a song that was missing. I think it was Rosie that was really missing. And as such, sort of like their ability to really kind of put another vocalist up against Prince or with Prince, you know, because from there on out, Rosie was kind of the last sort of hurrah of background singers, in the sense that from there on out, it's either largely sort of band based or worse, you know, pre-recorded. And I think when you listen to these shows, you miss that element, you know, because there are just a lot of moments where she could have taken it to the next level. That said, I think the band just doesn't really get the just due, because some would argue that the record wasn't great, you know. But I think if you separate the two, the band is just ridiculous here. And I think it's probably like might be my favorite incarnation of a Prince group ever. Especially if I link it to sort of like the second iteration, where it's just Tommy and Sonny and Morris and Michael. But those 2 years, man, like that band, and I would want to kind of go back to those horns. I think the horns gave him just the ability to almost become orchestral at times, you know, to really arrange. And I mean, I know a lot of it was their arrangements, but it just, I think it expanded the sound in an incredible way. I'm just a big fan of the Hornheads as a group in terms of what their sound added, both on record and I think definitely on the tour. And then again later, by the time Europe comes around with Act 2, I mean, he's doing entire hour-long encores with the band where he's actually playing nothing but new stuff, and you can hear he's getting through the main sets just to be able to get there, you know. So like everything is fast. Like even when you talk about And God Created Woman, I don't know about the Act 1 version, but at Act 2, I think it was like a minute long sort of medley thing that they did when he was just changing clothes. And it felt like a lot of it was like that. He did take his time. And I want to sort of kind of push back again. Well, no, we can get there later with Act 2. But no, I think the band just, you hear like, especially those after shows, the band is on another level with it. I think they took what they were doing with Diamonds and Pearls and like outside of the absence again of Rosie, just really took it to another level. And just the rhythm section, just there's a level of perfection there that is at times almost scary, but it's never sterile, you know what I'm saying? Outside of maybe the moments where a lot of it starts to be again pre-recorded, because that's kind of a pet peeve of mine in the Prince sort of arc of touring, if you will. This is kind of one of the last times where there's like literally like 20 people on stage, like playing their asses off, like, and you just hear just like a lot of just playing in the moment, you know. And I think that again makes this just an incredible time and an incredible Prince tour.
All right, somebody jump on in there.
Yeah, man. I mean, whew. I mean, just even on the let's talk about the fact that Prince had a #1 hit with Cream and he didn't even play it in Act 1. Let's talk about that part. And it's funny because that was one of those songs where you could put in any Prince set and it'll work. I've seen it work, and I've done it actually a few times myself. Like where as soon as we say this is it, it's almost that same reaction. And even with the version of She's Always in My Hair for Act 1, like even that, like I think my boy Funkenberry said that too, and I was like, yeah, I'm in agreement with that too. There was a lot of that in those clues that he was kind of giving off. Because remember, there's the Carmen Electra aspect, then there's let's not forget the Gold Nigga aspect too, because at that time, and of course, as y'all know where that sits with me, simply because of the fact that Prince was picking and choosing. And I think that by the time we get to Act 2, he was already, you know, Prince is, as you know, epitome of evolution. He already was putting things in place. I mean, let's keep it honest. He's always done that. You kind of knew where things were going. And the one thing I had a talk with the Incredibles, this is a long time ago, Robin Power. Those who remember Robin Power from Graffiti Bridge and that whole situation, I remember she was telling me a story. And he's like, you know, things were all good enough. And then, you know, she kept bringing Tara around. At the time, I didn't know who Tara was. And of course, I found out right now they say, oh, you don't know what Tara? I said, who's Tara? That's Carmen Electra's real name. Oh, so it blew my mind. There was a real conversation me and her were having. And it's just like, I put things in perspective. So with Act 1 and Act 2, all of that stuff was like, oh shoot. Then you start to see the obvious clues with the thing. And I think probably the most obvious one for me, and maybe somebody can shed more light on this, but the direct obvious thing for me was on, of course, the 3 Chains of Gold long form video, where at the end there's this whole thing of the name change and whatnot. And how interesting, because of course he signed to Warner Brothers, and then you start hearing all these different things. And then I guess probably like a year later, if not around that time, next thing you know, what he got on his face? Slave. So it's just almost like that period, Act 1 and 2 was just really the whole aspect of him doing these things and having these arrangements. There's this one arrangement, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, at the BBC. I don't know how often he did this other. There was one where he did America, and then he put dance, music, sex, romance on top of it. And that shit, listen here. That shit, I'm sorry.
It was real up tempo too. Like,
you know, I mean, but those who know, you know, I'm like that whole, it's almost like somebody said that he was trying to get to it, like he was trying to get through a lot of stuff real quick because he really wanted to get to the newer material that he was already kind of hinting at. Some stuff didn't come out as of yet, and there's some stuff that got, well, in our version of Elite, because this is before technology began to really, really get advanced, before we can really hear certain stuff. So the bootleg was king. To your point, see what you said earlier, bootlegging, what that, it's almost like if you could get your hands on any of that stuff to be tangible, you'll hear the clues, not only in the songs, the direction, the stuff that he would say, the banter, you know, just like, I'm just paying attention to everything. And like I told y'all earlier, at that point, had that been for the last 10 years, I was disinvested. See my face? I'm sitting there like this. I'm just paying attention to every detail on that level. And he really, really was just kind of going through these phases and making these decisions that we would later see after 93. So,
anybody else on that question? So I wanted one more Act 1 question in, because I want to give enough time for us to discuss Act 2 in the second hour, and then on the third hour, I want to try to take third 30 minutes, try to take some questions from the group. The DNA San Francisco show, where he asked, so what do y'all think the verdict is going to be? And then launches into black motherfuckers in the house. I mean, you know, at that time, bootlegs were jumping out so quick. Even though I wasn't at that show, it was like experiencing that in real time, right? You had the officers, you know, beating up folk. Yeah, the OJ trial had all that stuff, and then here is Prince, and maybe one of his most definitive black militant moments at an after show, understanding what the after show. So even if you experienced it in real time, or if you experienced it through a boot, tell me what was your initial reaction when you put one and one together. Oh, and imagine, from what I understand, that was a majority white house. If I understand, it was a majority white crowd. If you guys correct me if I'm wrong. And he says, what do y'all think the verdict is going to be? So tell me, what was your initial response to that? Or even response now?
Well, now, you know, looking back at it through a 2022 lens, I'm not surprised, because he was always about challenging things, especially in later years when he did Baltimore Song and things like that. And he made that statement at the Grammys, you know, albums like Black Lives Still Matter. And again, and this may cost me my Prince card, but I was not there at the DNA Lounge. So I would have loved to have been there. And when I did see him there, for Third Eye Girl, it was also a majority white audience. But I think just from an intensity standpoint, when he played at a club like that or in a space that small, that type of show was for us, us real fans, So most people in there knew that song,
right.
And they're like, let's get it popping, because when I was at, Third Eye Girl, he goes into She's Always in My Hair. And so next week, what's that? I'm like, what? Why are you here, man? Damn. So I would have loved to have been in that space where he brought out, first of all, a song that's not released here, that's hard to find. And then he just does it, and then he lays that on top of it in the middle, like you said. We have the Rodney King over here. We got the OJ thing over here. And he just, what do you guys think about the verdict? Makes you think about things at times. That's good. That's a great thing to do for an artist.
Anybody else? All right, so I want to go. Okay, so you said something about She's Always in My Head, but I want to give equal time to Act Two. So I hope I come back because I really want to ask. I think that his performance of She's Always in My Hair doing Act One is his greatest performance of She's Always in My Hair, particularly with the extended guitar solo at the end. And almost, if you remember, speed metal and all that was happening, and he was like really clear, like, I'm still here to prove to y'all I'm still the baddest MF on this thing. That, to me, it wasn't just it was a funky. Does anybody have any quick, just one-liners you want to say about his performance of She's Always in My Hair in Act One before we turn to Act Two?
The tone.
Okay.
I mean, as a guitarist, I mean, anybody that, and even anybody that knows the whole extension of how Prince plays certain things, because every solo is different, and you can tell when he's real. I mean, he's always in it, but it was that one when I saw it, I was like, yo, it was one of those kind of moments. It's almost similar to the whole While My Guitar Gently Weeps thing he did for the Hall of Fame in those banters. Because if you have to ask a guitarist like me, what are the 10 best Prince solos? I mean, I literally have them in order, and that one is definitely in my top 5 without question. I'm just like, it made the hairs on my arms and my neck stand up. So you would think after all that time that this man, besides Hendrix and Angus Young and people who I love that influenced my style, can still give you that, even in that. And like you said earlier, the whole proving of I'm still the baddest in the game, because as we all know, Prince had a way of just showing you without even having to say it. That's part of his whole mystique in terms of that, where, the calm part of who he is in terms of, okay. And the next thing you know, he's going in for the kill, and there's nothing you can do about it. So,
hey, look, you know what I remember about that? Man, so what I remember about that is, I know, believe it or not, pre-internet saying message boards, that was the word of mouth. Like, you had to go to the show because he does, like, She's Always in My Hair, which had never been done prior to that at any of the shows. So, like, that was like a crowd pleaser. Like, when he started it was like, everybody just around.
And somebody can correct me either in the chat or on the panel, but I think that in that solo at the end, and then we're going to turn our attention to Act Two, that may have been the first time that he actually specifically or explicitly plays Jimi Hendrix from a metatextual standpoint of, this is some shit I'm based on, and this is who I am. And because I don't remember him, I remember him doing takes on him, but when he does Voodoo Child in the middle of that solo, it's clear it's almost like a musician sampling in a way. And so for me, that was the very first time where he was explicitly nodding to Hendrix in a way, which was important because remember, in all those early Dirty Mind interviews, he was distancing himself from Smokey Robinson and Jimi Hendrix. And here we have on the Act One show, he specifically saying, no, this is my heritage, this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to play, right? So let's turn down to Act 2. So let me go around the horn, and whether you saw it live or on booth, what were your initial impressions of Act 2?
Well, can I speak to something that you just said about his heritage for a minute?
Yeah.
You know, we really need to kind of look at the importance of having Sonny T in say the band, because I think having Sonny in the band, not knowing at that time, but knowing what we know now, that was very important for Prince in terms of staying rooted like to the community.
Yep.
Because that's when in these after shows you started seeing them do stuff like Skin Tight, like What Is Hip, like Maybe Your Baby, and all these tunes. And that was the answer to the question, because, you know, as Sister Camila said in I think one of the other panels, you know, journalists were, you know, like would always say, well, Prince sounds like, you know, Pink Floyd, or he sounds like The Who, or this. And this was his way of saying, let me show you who I really grew up on, you know. And so having Sonny in the band, you know, I think that allowed him to revisit those things and say, okay, I can do this live. But that's when we started seeing him do like 777, you know, like and the bass line and stuff live. And I think, you know, when you talk about like what was going on at the time, you know, so with Rodney King, I think having Sonny in the band and all that, that really, and in the stuff that he probably was dealing with, I know with Warner's, that led to the writing of Slave on the Face, that as Sister Camila would say, had him rooted in his blackness again, you know, to say, hey, like this is what I grew up on. Because when you hear him do like Maybe Your Baby, you know, that's some, you know, that's like, that's not hit Stevie Wonder. That's like deep album cut Stevie Wonder. you know, like when you hear him do Skin Tight, I don't remember, you know, I could be wrong because I was just I was an infant then, you know, kind of young. I don't know if that was a hit on pop charts, but I know that was a hit in on like R&B charts and in black households, you know, for sure. You know, like when he's doing like What Is Hip, you know, like Tower Power, like I mean, you know, and not doing the vocals, like he's playing the lead part like on the guitar. Shout out to Law, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's no easy task, and those aren't songs that, I mean, so, you know, are like mainstream, okay, like that, you know. And those aren't the only ones. Like, I mean, he's doing I Believe in You, The Jam, and Hair, like all those type things. Like that's R&B all day. Like that's funk R&B. I mean, that's like, you know, that ain't getting played on the oldies channels, you know, with the Beatles. That's the, you know. And so I think that was, you know, I mean, again, shout out to Uptown, because we started to get wind of these after shows, and it was like, if you go to the show, you might want to stick around because it's after show somewhere, and you go like you go hear something there that you've never heard before, you know what I'm saying? And so, you know, I think by the time Act 2 came around, I know to answer your question, the buzz for Act 1 was so great, like I mean, you know, like Nicolay said, like Act 2, he was kind of, okay, well, let me get through this and get to this new stuff. I particularly never saw an Act 2 show. I saw Act 1, but from what I heard about Act 2, you know, much like what Nicolay said, it was where some new stuff was being played, and it was like, oh, okay, but still, you know, Prince live is Prince live. Like, you know, even an off day for Prince live is better than most people live.
Right. Oh yeah.
I mean, you know, like you said, like the man had a cold and he still performed sick. Like, you know, I mean, an off day for Prince live is better than most people live. So, you know, I know the bootlegs I've heard of it, I thought it was great. You know, again, you know, I mean, greatest music teachers I never took, you know, like actually met in person, but you know what I'm saying? I you know, he's been a music teacher for like 30 plus years for me. So, I mean, hey, you know, he you know, delivered Act 2 as well.
I mean, it was an interesting time, man, because I think they were even selling Act 2. I mean, I was in Europe at the time. I grew up in Europe. And even though I didn't go see the show, like I said, I wasn't really super into that stuff at the time. Like, I remember they maybe even sold it as like your last opportunity to see some of these songs being played or something to that extent. They were actively playing on the fact like that the name change was going to be a thing. And then like I will say that my favorite moments in Prince bootlegdom, by far favorite moments, top one, above like Small Club, above like the most fantastic like soundboard recordings, are the Maite speeches on the Act 2 tour, where she talks about, where she announces the name change and that Prince is not going to record, like, oh, he's going to release no more albums and this and that. And like a lot of these bootlegs are audience recordings, and what makes it incredible is you just hear people's heart drop and just the sort of the confusion and the sheer sort of dumbfounded like sounds that you hear around. Like it's just, that is just such an incredible, I think, time in Prince history, just because of what was going on. And he was stretching, I think, his fans and I think a lot of other things to the max. Like he was really pushing, you know. And then he would go into 1999 and people are like, wait, what? This is, oh, can we party again? Like, word up. And then he would race into like, you know, America, like Law said, and all these hits. And then he would come back, but then he would play Dark, you know, like the whole, like there's a Birmingham show, which I don't know which one Hasit would have gone to, but like there's a Birmingham show where he plays like the entire 7-minute arrangement of Dark, like with the horns exactly the way that we now know it as being from the record, but that was nowhere near out at the time. He played like 4 or 5 entire songs from Come as an encore to these shows, and would take up 45 minutes to an hour, you know, and you could hear sort of deliberation in him as he's doing these things, because like Act 2 had become sort of kind of a greatest hit show. He had sort of retooled it. He had fired or not, he hadn't fired. Like, is this such a confusing time again? Like Tony and Kirk and Damon are not on these main shows, but they were around because they're in the England after show and they're in some of these after shows. So it's not like they were fired, but they're taken off the main show, but the MPG is opening. So like it's the MPG without Tony, with Levi doing some leads, I want to say, like some singing, some guitar, but it's more kind of deuce and a quarter stuff and oil can and all the, like, it's phenomenal. Like there's a couple of bootlegs of these opening sets, and it's really great because those songs are just really sort of like they're its own little thing in the Prince genre, obviously, and they play it you know, the arrangement and everything, they nailed absolute shit out of them, pardon my French, but like it's weird because like Tony and them are nowhere to be found, you know. So it's, but then the greatest hits, he expands sort of on playing She's Always in My Hair, and so now there's like Sign of the Times, and there's Girls and Boys, and even I do think Girls and Boys sort of actually kind of got like a sort of cool upgrade here. I think it worked with the hornheads, like because they added just massive power to it that I think sort of worked. And I think even Sign of the Times, like he was, and She's Always in Your Hair, like he was really Always in My Hair, he was really showing sort of his guitar skills off, Seeley, like you said. Like he wasn't playing a lot of guitar during the tours per se, but he was like on those moments that he was like, he was shredding, like he was adding Peach, you know what I'm saying, and just shredding, just absolute. Like when you listen to those solos, it just, like, I know a lot is being said about the 88 era of soloing, you know, and I think it's probably was a new peak for him for sure at that point, and a new sort of, he had opened up a completely new universe. If you listen to Small Club, you know, it's like, oh my, like this could be an entire lane for an artist. Like this show in itself could be somebody else's whole sort of career arc, you know what I mean? And I think again here he stepped his playing up, man. Like, and it's just a raw level here in 93 that is just like, and then obviously in 94 when he's the only guitarist in the band, or like 95, but it's incredible just to hear just the emotion and the rawness that he puts in his playing here. And you hear that he's sort of unlocked, to my hearing, and Law can say more about that, but like he sort of unlocked a new level to his playing, I feel like, while it wasn't even really what he was mainly doing at the time. So, you know, obviously there's the Undertaker as kind of a parallel here. So, you know, he's many different things in this era, you know what I'm saying? But his guitar playing is just mind blowing during this time.
I see. Jump in, brother.
I don't have the historical context that Ricky and others have talked about so eloquently. I mean, for me, look, as I said, I was 15 years old. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about black music, really. I was learning for the first time. And at this concert, at the London show that I went to at Wembley Stadium, which was back then and still now, you know, the biggest venue you can find in the UK, I heard stuff for the very first time. The Cross, Sometimes It Snows in April, the beautiful ones. I hadn't heard these songs on record before, never mind anywhere else. So to hear it then and to learn about it at a live show, that's not an experience you can repeat. The other thing I think, thinking about it sort of many years later, is what a roller coaster that time was. He did the show, which was a kind of greatest hits show in London. And then just over a month later, he released the hits compilation with the B-sides.
Mm-hmm.
And in the liner notes, you know, Alan Leeds' liner notes, it basically says Prince is retired. You know, that this is that the era is over, and that we'll see what happens next. We'll see what the next 15 years bring. And you know, you're 15 years old, and you've just, you know, been to the greatest event you'll ever go to in your life, in your short life. And then you hear that this guy that's it. No more, there's nothing else coming as far as you know. And you're 15, so you're not questioning anything anyway. You're just taking everything as read. And then the Undertaker videos and those kind of things come out. And then he opens a store in my hometown in London as well, which, you know, we went to the opening of. And then it felt like, okay, there must be other things happening there. There must be a new era dawning. There must be, you know, and the thing he used to say in all his liner notes, you know, welcome to the dawn, or may you live to see the dawn. So we thought at the time that dawn is happening, but you know, that concert doesn't just sit in isolation for me. It sits as a kind of you know, a pivot between what happened before and then what exciting things and crazy things, as Nicolay said, and slightly catastrophic things were to come.
Okay. Anybody else want their initial opinions on Act 2, either boot or live?
See, Liegh.
Yes.
I forgot to mention one thing about Act 1, bootleg wise, because I see my Atlanta people, Jason, are here, and say D'Angela's here. When Prince did the show in Atlanta, it snowed really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And he had done a signing in time. It snowed really bad. He gave a free show for the people at say the hotel and say the lounge downstairs. And I remember people were on the news. Some were fans, some who had never seen him, and they were like flabbergasted that he was so great live. And they were like, you know, probably the most intimate thing, because, you know, like at that time he was still like Prince, and they were expecting this, and it was a small like hotel lounge, and he had the band come in, and they did like I think a 2-3 hour show for free. I mean, like just for all the hotel guests. And I remember, I mean, people were on, say, the news who weren't even fans, who had to go, well, like who witnessed that, and they were just like, yo, I'm like a fan for life now, because they never knew he could be that musical, because, you know, he was the, you know, Prince, and so they thought it was, you know, like, you know, Kiss in 1999 and all that, and then they saw a different side of him.
Right.
And, I just remember, you know, hearing that and hearing people talk about it who didn't make the show, who say were just locals and natives, like, man, so, you know, like that was a very nice gesture that he did, because he didn't have to do that. So he could have been in rock star mode, like, I ain't playing for nobody. Look, I ain't getting paid. But they were down there, played like 2-3 hours like that, you know, for nothing. And so, you know, just to kind of show, you know, like the type cat that he was off stage.
Yeah.
You know, and so sometimes, you know, those things kind of get lost in these little moments. You know, like when we discussing him, his after shows and stuff like that, man, like, you know, he still was, you know, it's a humanitarian enough to kind of, you know what, I'm just gonna give these people a free show. Look, okay, they snowed in, because for him, you know, for them, like that snow might not have been nothing big, you know, but, you know, like, you know, man, for us in Atlanta, that was like, oh, stop everything, shut everything down. And so that's what they did. And if anybody remembers that blizzard of 93 or that snowstorm of 93, it did shut everything down. And so it was the talk for a while, like on all the radio stations and TV shows, that he had just taken the time to do that, man. So yeah, so you know, I just wanted to mention that one little part, man.
That's an important part. Let me see. Either Brother Law, Brother Wiggins, you want to say anything about Act 2?
Yeah. To piggyback off of Ricky, you know, it's crazy when I hear anybody that really thinks that Prince's musicianship should ever. That means, to me, if anybody says what those people said, they haven't been listening. And I hate to be, I'm not being biased by no stretch of the imagination, but it's almost like, you know, the fact that we didn't hear Trace. I even got into an argument with a studio engineer one time, and it was very interesting. He was like, "Yeah, Prince is great, but he can't play. He can't play without effects." I'm like, did you hear Crazy You and So Blue? Did you hear For the Tears in Your Eyes? Did you hear Power Fantastic, which is him in one of his most authentic jazz moments? So it's almost like I can't even just hearing you say that, I was just like, anybody at that particular point up particular, you gotta remember to be, I mean, in my opinion, by the time Act 1 and Act 2 rolled around, and I say this very, very eloquently, in my personal opinion, even if he had been pushing himself to more artistry, he had nothing to prove at that point, to be honest. He had nothing to prove. And then even going back to what we said earlier about the influences and all that, because here's the thing about Prince, as much as he thrived on musicianship, he thrived on mystique. So even if he didn't tell you that Hendrix, or let me see, you see later in musicology, he finally shouted out people he listened to. But again, like all of us in this room right here that knows the history, it wasn't easy. It wasn't hard to tell. And then even in other after shows that he did Just My Imagination. So my thing is that, you know what I mean? Like for me, I don't think it was never lost on that. I just think people chose to focus too much on the star power and quality that he had, that he possessed, that at that particular point, there was no other artist, musician like him in that particular, if you want to say decade, for lack of a better phrase. So it's just like, it's interesting to me because with Act 2, I just felt like coming into that, we're getting this glimpse, and yeah, he's doing a lot of the oldies, but then there's these fantastic arrangements. My personal favorite part, because I didn't see it live, but of course, thanks for the wonderful world of bootleg, and my very best friend, who is also the guitarist in my band, we had the tapes, and then later on they had the CDs pressed. So there used to be this record store on West 4th on Bleecker. They used to have all the other bootlegs that we didn't have, because there was some few that we were able to get. But every weekend, and just so happens, they had Act 1 and Act 2. I already seen Act 1, but I had never seen Act 2. So now to hear it and to hear all the stories behind it, it's like now I get a chance to hear it. My favorite part of that particular Act 2 tour is the cross-pollination from Sometime It Snows in April to The Cross.
Yeah.
Because first of all, The Cross is in my top 5 favorite Prince songs, because I felt like a lot of different things. You got to remember, the cool thing about these songs is that they're all in the same key. That's in the key of E. So, and I started putting it in my own show. I did it when we played Minneapolis for the first time. I opened up my Prince tribute set with that same order, acoustically. I did that first, and I went to The Cross. Then we brought everything in. So just even to this day, again, that version of it in Act 2, and then even just the way he was going about the stuff, it just kind of put things in perspective of who he is. Because like I said earlier, if you were to say what Ricky just said about what those other folks said in terms of Prince's musicianship, it's almost like he's already proven that he can unplug and give you the most intimate show. And after guitar, how about just the piano part?
Right.
Well, you can tell how he wrote most of his songs, the way he plays it, because you know he's like another Stevie when it comes to that whole left hand thing, where he can actually play the bass part while he's still hitting the chords. So the crazy interesting part about that is you're getting the full spectrum of that. And like I said earlier, from Act 1 and definitely to Act 2, Prince was at the height of his powers while dealing with this. And Tony M, you know, guys, you know, that's one of my very best friends in the world. We had a conversation about that, about why, you know, the missing factor, like, why wasn't y'all, what was going on? And he looked at me and started laughing. He said, well, come on, Law. You know how Prince started thinking. And then after a while, as we learned earlier, because for those that didn't know, and later led after like probably around 94, 95, because then Levi jumped ship, and then Tony was no part of the equation, and Damon wasn't, of course, Kirk stayed. And that's a whole nother topic we won't get into. But it's just almost like Tony told me, oh, the writing was pretty much on the wall. Like we could kind of see certain things where Prince would be like, okay, we're not doing it. I'm like, wow. Because when I started hearing stories about that, remember, all we had was the VHS and the different things that we were able to kind of catch and be like, oh, okay, they're not doing that show, but on this show, they're opening up, they're doing it. And it just became like a whirlwind. So that's what Act 2 really kind of sets in for me, because I was still, again, when it comes to Prince, I'm like this. I'm not saying it out my mouth, but in my mind, I'm like, what are you up to? What the hell are you about to do? I hear this, I see this. The next thing you know, 94, 95, it's a whole nother, MPG is still in effect, but it's just a whole nother vibe. And Act 2, again, I think was part of the little things that we would see that would lead into that.
So, Brother Wiggins, and I want to do 2 more questions and then try to catch some in the Q&A. So, Brother Wiggins, any thoughts you have about Act 2?
Real quick, yeah. Obviously, Act 2 was in Europe, and I do not live in Europe, but I would get my bootlegs every so often, and I'd see these songs like, well, what is Call the Law? You know, what's Johnny? What am I missing here? What's Golden Nigga? What? And that led me to really invest myself into the bootleg world. And there was a store up in Berkeley called Amoeba that had them all. And I would get in there and just go bananas. And, so it really just helped to expand my curiosity and to really marvel at his output, And then you have the long form video, I think it was Diamonds and Pearls, that has Call the Law video. I'm like, what is this? What is going on here? And going back to his guitar playing, if you look at the liner notes in the Gold Experience, he said, or I don't want to say he said, I think Alan Leeds wrote this, but he said, Prince realized he had gotten away from his guitar for a while. And from that point forward, he picked it back up and played a lot more guitar moving forward. I thought, okay, cool. And that was like at the whole genesis of the whole Warner's beef. So we spent a lot more time overseas than he did here. And I got one of my favorite bootlegs is Interactive Night. And I'm just listening to it. I'm like, what is all of this? And like I think Law mentioned, or Ricky mentioned, he was doing the jam. I'm like, what? He's doing the jam? I'm like, come home and do this. So I was really envious at the time of the crowds overseas getting the Act 2 and beyond shows.
Hey, wasn't this the period where he was where he was attacking lip syncers and he was like, hey, say don't buy no Levi products and like if they don't come on stage singing real live, y'all boom them off and all that type of stuff.
And actually he began that in like the second part of the show of Diamonds and Pearl. Remember, that would be the scream that would be this really scream, and Prince would be laying down and he would say, and Tony would be like, what's wrong? And Prince was like, I feel like I could be doing so much more. Tony like, what? I feel like I should be lip syncing. And Tony be like, oh hell. And then Prince of course would turn to the crowd and go, fuck that. So it's kind of like that juxtaposition that he's getting on lip syncing. But there's a whole lot of tracks going on here in the back, Prince. So it's kind of like, I'm with you, but there's some tracks back there. Two quick questions. One I want to say to the young people, to show you just how strong the bootleg game was. I lived in Jackson, Mississippi, and I was getting those Act 2 bootlegs on VHS within 30 days. I would shout out my bootlegger, but I don't know what the statement of law of limitations is on it, so I ain't gonna shout out my man's name. But literally, I was getting those because, and something else we can't get in this because I'll tell you first. What I also remember about Act Two, I guess another question. That's the first time I remember corporate promotion of Prince shows because I remember either Coke or Pepsi sponsored one of those Act Two shows, and I remember there was kind of an uproar of people kind of feeling like Prince had sold out because he had corporate sponsorship of some of those shows. But I want to go to something else quick. A couple of questions about Act Two. So we talked a little bit about Prince already turning his gaze toward new work. My question for you guys with Act Two is, were you disappointed that Act Two didn't feature more of the love symbol songs, or are you just okay with Act Two kind of being a transition of where Prince was going? Anybody can jump in and answer that.
I think again, if I look back at it, it made perfect sense to me. I think the Symbol album is a great album, but I think I understand why, for a variety of reasons, he was more excited about what was in the future, as he had always been before. So I think it was maybe a dumbing down of what Act One was in terms of maybe creativity, in the sense that yes, there was a lot of, it became a greatest hit show. But that said, I think it was a phenomenal version of that, and probably the last time that you know, I want to say by 97 or something like that, you know, he does the same thing, but it with all due respect, it starts getting tired at that point. He does like Take Me With You into Raspberry, like it at that point it really becomes medley like, and sort of like you could just sort of tell like there's just no longer really that spark in it to my listening ears, until later again. But I think in 93, it's still like, again, like Girls and Boys sound exciting as hell in this version. She's Always in My Hair, obviously an incredible moment. Even America and the way that he did 1999, that like 140 BPM medley at the end, like, and he's firing off 4 or 5 hits. But the horn arrangements and just, again, like Levi, like the arrangements are just on a level where you cannot listen to these shows and have any sort of complaints, honestly. And then add the after shows where they do stuff like, House in Order, like in London, the famous London after show, which Law alluded to, like they're staying in London, where they did main shows, then they did an after show that featured Mavis Staples and like the Steels and all of them, and then he did, on the same day, they did the BBC radio session, and we have all of that in relatively to a very good quality excuse me, thanks to the internet. And so House in Order, like, and they rehearse it over the tour, and there's a rehearsal bootlegs, like, it is just to hear that band play House in Order. Like, for me, there's nothing like it. Like, there's nothing like it. And there's a couple of more that they do, but that band also does like The Undertaker, you know what I'm saying? With just the kind of Power 3-0 vibes. They do Black Motherfucker in the House when they want to. The wide variety of stuff that at that point they're pulling out during these after shows, and just the sheer quality. Like, because even those, like, to us, those after shows seemed kind of loose, and they were to an extent. Like, they may not have had the full production, including some of the sounds and stuff, but the playing was still like phenomenal. They weren't dropping any like balls or nothing. It wasn't like, they were still right here. You know what I mean? So some of the most incredible, I think, again, Prince moments in bootleg are from that Act 2 tour. There's a Paris show that is after show that is absolutely incredible. London, there's something in Switzerland. I can't encourage looking that up, but you really should, because that is really an era of Prince that I think at the time seemed confusing, and looking back probably still is, but like now with the power of hindsight, I just have an incredible fondness of that time, including the style. Like, I love his hair during this time. Like, I'm just a big fan of the Act 2 or Act 1, what is it, but the hair, the the sort of evolution of
Typhoon.
man, like it was on point. Like it was Diamonds and Pearls was cool, but like Act One, like it was on point. Like it was stylistically just, I think, really, really incredible. You know, the outfits, the band photos, and there's literally 20 people. Like it's Parliament Funkadelic without it being, you know, there's 6, 7 horn players alone. And you can see from the band photos that Prince is excited about it, because there's a couple of very well-known photos with the band backstage, like right before these shows, where it's almost similar to how there's some of the Sign of the Times and the Love Sexy Band, but it's just, I mean, it's just a new era, and the clothes, like the costumes are new, and it's like you could tell that he was excited. I can't like ever proclaim to know what he was feeling like, but it seems to me like he was incredibly excited. And then add those encores where it just takes the time. I mean, it is just incredible. And there's, I think some of them, like he's pushing the curfew and stuff. And it is just, as a fan, it is just an absolutely mind-blowing era.
So Hasit, jump in right quick, brother, because the folks in the chat said we ain't heard from Hasit enough. So tell the people a little bit about it.
Well, it may have been a greatest hits tour for most people, but it wasn't for me. You know, it was Prince playing for the first time in my life tour. And, you know, I think that it was the end of July that it happened. It was at Wembley Stadium at the end of July. That entire summer I spent going back and listening to every album that I had missed, you know, growing up. I mean, I was only, a year old when Prince released his debut album. So this is, you know, I'm a latecomer to all of this at this point. So all I can really say is that this is the most important concert I'll ever go to in my entire life. There's nothing, you know, that can compare to that, which is a pun, I know, but that's how it is.
Hey man, that's enough, brother.
There you go. Yeah. Look at that. Let me quick switch. Go ahead, brother Law.
I mean, I think everybody can tell this already. The people in the chat are funny, but I wasn't disappointed with shit, because again, for me, you know, and I guess to the fault of anything, because I hold New Edition in the same regards as I hold Prince, because those are the two main parts of my stage performance in terms of I deliver. Because again, I have the dilemma of being a real singer who happens to be a real MC, who happens to be a real musician who really dances. So for me, again, for every part of that to get better, it brings me back to that point of I'm like this. Where are you going? I'm trying to see where you're going to go, and how can that aid and influence? Because for us musicians and artists, who we become the living embodiment of our influences, but as Prince has always taught us, because he's a perfect example of it. Prince was able to embody all of his influence with a great package. That's why I said earlier, like, even though we knew that Sly was an obvious influence on what he did, certain things, and people forget that as much as they talk about Hendrix, Prince was more Santana prone than Hendrix. Yep. So if we want to get technical. So the thing is that I heard that, and when I got deeper into Santana, thanks to my mother, I began to know. I'm like, you know what? Because you listen to the vamp out of Everlasting Now, where they do that Latin thing, that whole solo he does in that's straight Santana. That whole vibe is Santana. So going back to Act 2, going into all the things, how can anyone? I think if any true Prince fan and student that really just was able to accept, because to be honest with you, the only time Prince disappointed me, and I don't care who says what, that's just my opinion. I think right around the time when the whole Jehovah thing got really heavy, because to me, it bled into the music too much. For me, even though the musicianship was still there, I went to go see him in musicology, the whole bit. But there, to me, after that, there were moments. So right around between the Symbol album, Going to Come, Chaos and Disorder, and even Emancipation, which I love. Like, that's one of my favorite things as well. Like, that whole, I just knew that Prince was going to always follow where his heart was going. So the whole thing about it is that, for me, like, just like how Nick always says about this period, for me, that later period, that's actually where I kind of fell out and was like, okay, this is a little bit too spooky for me. I'm still with you though. Still love you. I'm still with you. I'm still listening because you gotta remember. I mean, the Lotus album is a great album too. So it's just really the whole part of it where for me it made me miss it because in this symbol era, Diamonds and Pearls, it's just almost like I said earlier. He was in my opinion, he was at the height of his powers. It's like to me, there was nothing that he couldn't do, and I wouldn't be able to be like, I'm with it. Let me see where he's going with it. And true to my word, I was, because when he went with Gold Experience and that whole thing and the transition of everything else, and then with the whole internet thing, I was with all of it. I'm like, I'm digging it. Am I being biased because he's my number one idol? No, I'm just saying that more so because I understood it at that particular period. So for me, no disappointment.
So let me get
go ahead.
Yeah.
You know, I will say, you know, my most fondest memory of both of these tours and shows, honestly, were the bootlegs that people have been mentioning. You know, and I'll be honest with you, like when I heard him do like as a musician, and being like a history teacher, when I, you know, saw him like connect the dots with doing like What Is Hip and Hair and Soul Sacrifice and, you know, those tunes as like a musician, I was like, okay, now I can connect these dots. When I was getting bootlegs and Schoolyard was on there and he was talking about Squid Cakes playing, I was like, okay, let me I got to go research some Tower Power. And that stuff actually helped me because I knew now, say, from whence he came, you know, because like Law said, like you heard you knew the Sly thing, say, was there. But then when I could go back and listen to Santana or Tower Power, you know, and all that stuff, you know, so I knew the Graham like influence with the Sign of the Times film like intro with the band coming in with, say, the drum, but that was an instant, say, for me. So, you know, now I had these other things to kind of, you know, like dig into to help me better understand where he was and what he was doing. So, like, you know, I understood like why he had it. I think added horns now. I understood these arrangements, you know, like when he was doing Sweet Thing, you know, I don't think it's a person that's heard him do Sweet Thing on bootleg that hasn't felt empowered to try to learn that opening, say, guitar riff. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, when you hear him do, it's like, okay, when say you hear him doing I forget the Kool and the Gang song that man they did then, but like he had done the superhero song for the Steelers for, say, the Blank Man movie. And say, you know, like all those type of things. So, you know, I was more excited about, and then like Arthur said, you know, bootlegs weren't cheap back then. Like you were paying like $50 a pop. You know, it was like, hey, like you were, coughing up some dough, but you were getting some rare stuff. So it
was really worth it. That money was worth it because this is the greatest band I think that he's had. Like, and I know taste is a taste thing, like, and we can talk about that, but like this was his greatest band, or maybe his last great band, if you want to say. He's had phenomenal players since, like, but as a band, this was it.
So I want to get at least one question I've seen in the chat and in the Q&A, and then I want to come back to something Nicolay said about the band. So thinking about the estate, thinking about box sets, I want you to give me, and I know it's going to be difficult, one Act 1 show and one Act 2 show that when either the estate or somebody puts these box sets together, that you want that one act show. It could be a concert or an after show, or a concert or after show for Act 2. So give me one Act 1 show and one Act 2 show that you feel like must be in whatever box set the estate does. Gonna start with Watt and go around.
Okay, starting with me. I can't say I know particularly one particular show. You know, I think if they do a box set, you know, I'm kind of the mindset you should do an era and not say an album, you know, meaning like if you do the Symbol album, include the Gold Nigga album, include Carmen's album, include a bootleg show, you know, include the live after, you know, like Act 1 show and then Act 2 show.
The Carmen album, dog?
Hey, man, I mean, okay. Can
we do two versions?
All right. Include the Carmen album, maybe without the vocals. Shout out to the MBG. you know, because I know some people are really upset that she took a door and, you know, put a beat behind it and did all that. I know some people are angry about that, but yeah, you know, that's I mean, you know, I think when they do these say deluxe sets, they really you know, you got to start looking at Prince in his totality, and his totality is stuff that was going on around said album, meaning after shows or side projects or say what have you. So you know, I think you need to include that in these, I know, deluxe things, but you know, I think any show from Act 1 and then show from Act 2, and then, you know, and include an after show set. You know, I think that would make a nice little you know, box set. Include the gold, you know, the gold out. I know the MPG Gold End album. You know, I think that would be great. You know, and like maybe that botched that I know that highly circulated Madhouse 91, 92 say rehearsal with the extended horn section. You know, shout out to all my Madhouse people. So I mean, so you know, I know me and Nicolay, you know, big on Madhouse, so you know, so include that in there. But yeah, you know, that's my take on it.
Brother Wiggins.
Okay. Well, you know, to piggyback on what Ricky said, you know, you have to look at it as an era, and I would definitely want the show I was at, because at one point he hinted at Housequake, and the place just came apart at the seams. You know, I didn't see the DNA show. Damn it. I'd want that on there. And I'd want to see the London show, because I've seen footage of shows that he's done over there, and those crowds are just pure fire. And as a side note, as a little hidden gem, someone mentioned it. I'm probably going to butcher the word, so I apologize. But there's some footage from Ghent over in Europe. You know, I have some of that on VHS, and it's like a 23rd generation copy. I would like to see that in pristine restored format. So yeah, all of that would be in there, and I'll just be happy as a clam. And as far as the box sets as a premise or as a ideal, I'm all in on the super deluxe. I have no problem, you know, dropping that money. You know, 300. Let's go. Let's make it happen. You know, if they could do something like that with this footage or Love Sexy footage, I'm there. Make it happen all day.
I'm just gonna put mine on layaway if it's 300. All right, brother Hasit.
For real.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I mean, I agree entirely with Mark and Ricky. The show that I went to, just because I want that for my own nostalgia's sake, and to add to the list that Ricky said mentioned, I mean, except Carmen perhaps, The Undertaker. I want that.
Brother Lau.
I'm here. So yeah, for me, there's the impending part as a true New York, Brooklyn in the house. What's up? To shout that out. If anything, because I haven't even purchased even the other one that they had for the New York show, they're going to include in box set. So if they're going to have that, like Mark said before, anything of those eras, I think would be the perfect combination, because this is when the exploration of what he was doing after the shows and all that kind of stuff. I just think for any diehard Prince fan like myself or anybody else, any component of that era or anything to go for box sets for after shows, it's crazy. And you know, and I say that proudly because when he did the World Club, I had just joined Parliament Funkadelic, so I was there the night that he did the One Night Alone live thing, and I had no idea that was going to the after show, not the actual thing, but the after show that was happening over there. And we didn't even know that was going to be recorded. So imagine like a year later, I think it was a year later, a couple of, the shit comes out, and I'm like, yo, we were there. Like we were just like, they probably hear us in the crowd yelling. So we were in the front. I went when I finished with George, I went right to the front. As soon as I was done with everything, and I made a bet with my friend, I said, I bet you my money the Prince is going to play here after that. I said, no, he ain't. Why would you think that? I said, because there's no way in hell that George Clinton is going to be over here and Prince at the Avery Fisher Hall, and they don't meet up and something don't happen. And I was right. So it's one of those things where anything of that section will always be great for a box set or anything of that caliber. So I'm all in terms of those eras.
Brother Nicolay?
I think Act 1, Radio City Music Hall in New York would make sense. Like we already have some of that because it was put out on the MPGMC. The LA shows are great. Like LA show would be my other, the Universal Amphitheater, where he like again, like before they PA play like a lot of new stuff first, and then after show Chicago would be my pick, even though that's a weird one because again he was sick, but there's like some weird awkward stuff with Malcolm Jamal Warner going on, and it's like I think for the era it's just really cool. It's just a very unique show. Like you could take a better show, but that would be my pick. Act 2, he did several shows where they were actually part of festival bills, so I'd go with one where the MPG was opening up, which I think there was a Madrid one that is really, really dope. And there's some in he did a lot of shows in Germany at that time. And I think there's a
Hey, is that Radio Music Hall show? Is that the one say with Lenny Kravitz? I mean, joins him for like When You Were Mine?
No, that was
94.
Okay.
Yeah, that was at the Apollo, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was 94.
It was the Apollo.
Yeah, but I think after show London would have to be the one. Like London, like it's just an incredible, like that concert. Like when you listen to it as a concert, you would think like any artist would probably give their arm or leg to pull that off, and that wasn't even the main thing for your boy. Like get the hell out of here. Like that one, as a musician, will make you mad in the best possible way. That experience is its whole. There's a video bootleg of it. There's a video official of it with Sacrifice of Victor, but that was edited down. Like it was only like, so the soundboard bootlegs that a lot of people know are edited down version of a hour-long, 2-hour set. And I think if you can track down the full version, there's mind-blowing stuff that happens at that show that is just like on another level. And to know that, again, that was like the third thing they did in a day or some crazy shit like that. It's just like the band at the top of their ability, Prince at the top of his ability. It's like on.
So I'm going to sneak another question in. I was one of those people. Wasn't the biggest fan of the Game Boys when they first got in. They kind of grew on me. But I will say I was really surprised how I had to get used to them not being there when watching Act 2. Yeah. It's like the stage seemed really empty. And I don't just mean empty of people, but empty of presence. I think we don't give Tony M enough credit, at least for his presence and the magnanimity of his persona. So I guess just to see if anybody wants to say anything about when they were no longer there. Did you at least go, hey, why the stage so damn empty? Just whatever notion you had when they weren't there anymore.
I'll take this one. I mean, he laughing because as I've said on so many levels, Tony M as an MC, definite influence on me. Shout out to Chuck D from Public Enemy, who tweeted almost 2 weeks ago and let people know how much he was a fan of Tony. And Tony, you gotta remember, Tony based a lot of his rhyme style off of Chuck D.
Right.
So we all got on a three-way that night. I'm gonna give you a little bit of that conversation later. Like me, Chuck, and Tony actually got on a three-way. It was ridiculous. But the crazy thing is that their presence was automatically missed for me, even though I knew that Prince was going somewhere else and kind of fell out of favor, because as we all know, Tony would end up, suing Prince, as we all learned about that whole thing, because a lot of the contributions, because make no mistake, whether you love him or hate him, the bottom line is Tony and the Game Boys were a major contributor to the whole MPG vibe in terms of where Prince was going after he came out of the Love Sexy period. So the thing is that for me, he definitely was missed as well as Damon and Kirk. But the thing was, at the same time, it's like, you know, I missed him. But okay, whatever you're doing, Prince, that's my whole attitude. Like, okay, whatever you're gonna do, I'm just like, okay, I'm watching. But there was still that part of me that always believed that there should have been one more album or one more thing to kind of cement that period. Because then we wouldn't just be talking about Diamonds and Pearls and the Love Symbol album. We have another album where that influence stretched so long, but the mileage that Tony got out of it, because remember him and my other rhyme idol, the great Moni Love, who was one of my biggest influences as an MC, they wrote Carmen Electra's whole album, and Prince allowed that influence to come in and take over that, plus the Gold Nigga thing, and then the approach, and then you listen to the songs like The Flow and you know, and the Max and all these different things of Tony's voice and his presence. It definitely was missed after a while, at least for me. And anybody who's into real hip hop like myself and that understood Tony's phrasing and the way it layered on Prince, the way it would just come in out of nowhere, it would just be that particular part. I mean, even the greatest rhyme he did besides Sexy Motherfucker was My Name is Prince. You know, the funkier the beat, the funky that I get. Ooh, shit, lickily speak on the lyric, a new jack on the pulpit. Watch your dick in your trackers, leave us your secret. The syncopated rhymes are at their peak when you jumped on my DICK. That's one thing I don't play. The jock strap was too big for you anyway. And I'm sitting here like, this motherfucker here, man. I'm sitting there just like, and then we taking that vibe and adding it to what me and my Planet Troll movement was starting to do at that particular moment. But again, I can't say it enough. Call me biased, not just because he's on a song with me and Jelly Bean and Monty Moore, but also because I made sure of that, because I wanted people to recognize the influence he had on a real MC like me. And so we clear, Kool G Rap is my favorite MC of all time, and Big Daddy Kane comes right after that, and Rakim is number 3. So when people started questioning, like, I hate people like, you like Tony's? I said, well, if you don't understand lyricism and flow pattern and cadence, you really wouldn't get it. And then, like Nick said, it's you know, it's subjective. If some people just don't like it, they just don't like it. That's cool. But what we're not going to do is not recognize the skill that it takes to sit there and do a multi-syllabic rhyme on a pattern of a full floor hard driving 120 beats per minute. You dig what I'm saying? That doesn't come by every day. And that's the reason why. And then on a separate note, as a dancer and a choreographer myself, I don't think I have to tell you, in my honest opinion, that whole era, that's some of Prince's best dance work.
Oh yeah,
not the best. I mean, he always kills on stage when he danced before that. But to me, to see him doing the Running Man in high heels, for me, it's like, you know, like I told you before, it spoke to my era. A lot of my friends didn't like Prince until Get Off, until they heard Tony rhyme, until they heard Prince rhyme. They're like, yo, Prince trying to rhyme. Now, of course, you know, Prince is rhyming, but even when Prince rhymed, he rhymed better than most dudes, especially the guys we hear now. It's another subject we won't get into. But
so quick, I want to just because I know we're about a minute out. Just a couple more things in the question. Can't get to it. Nicolay's sister Erica Thompson said that she wants you to incorporate more music theory analysis when you in your presentation. So she's looking at your next presentation. Wants you to do a little bit more music theory analysis. And one other question, I think we can just answer this one quickly. Someone asked, why did Prince name the tours Act 1 and Act 2? And I just thought that was obviously because of the whole 3 Chainz of Gold narrative. Does anybody else have any thought on why it was Act 1 and 2, other than he's still kind of promoting that whole 3 Chainz of Gold narrative, and so Act 1 and Act 2 is kind of in that fictional storytelling narrative. Anybody else got any other take on why it was Act 1, Act 2?
Well, I think it could be because if you look at them both as individual concerts, they're different, but they are the same. It's the same headspace. And so he's like, okay, here's Act 1 of this headspace. Let me go overseas, change up a little bit, do a little something here, a little something there. And it's Act 2, but it's the same general headspace he was in.
Cool. Anybody else want to jump in on that? So we were right at 5:30. I think we were slated to go to 5:30. So let's see. Oh, there's a question. Let's see. since you hadn't heard the album yet, what made you buy a ticket and go to the concert?
I'd heard. I mean, I owned Diamonds and Pearls and the Symbol album at this point. I just hadn't heard everything else, and that followed.
Okay, very good. So he had heard Diamonds and Pearls and the Symbol album, just none of the other stuff. Very, very good. Okay, we see that. We kind of touched on this, but if you would like to have a complete tour box set, what would it be the best show to pick as a standalone live CD? You can bundle Act 1 and Act 2. So you might want to approach that one.
I think we already covered it, right, for the most part. But I mean, if you had to narrow it down to one, it would have to be an after show, I think. You know, which kind of is in itself sort of defeats the purpose, right? Because like you can't really separate the two. But I think an after show, and then I think probably what we decided is what's available. What is the best available? Again, London comes to mind for me.
So actually, I put the question on there because I know you had already talked about it, but for me, what's interesting about the question and the way that Richard posed it is, do we want to combine it or do we want to separate it? And the reason why I keep bringing that up is, you know, there's this rumor that there's a possibility that there's going to be a Love Symbol Diamonds and Pearls box set, and it doesn't matter, like, you know, like we've also talked about like a Black Album Love Sexy box set too. But for Love Symbol in particular, I really do think it deserves its own box set because it's just so rich, the entire Love Symbol era, in terms of everything that's involved with it. So just with that frame of mind, like I'm always about keeping things separate just so you can go deeper into that particular album or deeper into that particular era. I was just curious if you, obviously, just based on the response to why it was named Act 1 and Act 2 and Lieg's response to that, it makes sense that it would be a combined box set, like if you just did an Act 1, Act 2 live box set. But I'm curious if anyone feels differently, like you would rather just have an Act 1 box set and an Act 2 box set, or what you want like an Act 1, Act 2 box set combined, if it was just like a solo set, not bundled with the album or anything. It was just like you know what? I want a live box set, right? So this is kind of where I'm going to. I want a live box set that's not tied to an actual album. So if we had like a possibility of a live box set for this era, what would you want? You know, do you want Act 1, Act 2, or combined, or just solo?
I think you have to include both, because if you include one, someone's always going to say, well, yeah, okay, what about this one? So I think to do it justice, you'd have to include both, you know, like 2 separate CDs, or, you know, 4 separate CDs, however you want to do it. But
yeah. And I think including both of them would be some of the best scholarly documentation of just how rapidly in real time Prince's mind worked, right? Because he's beginning an album, he's beginning a tour in support of a particular album. And we all know that damn near halfway into an album, into a tour, he was already through with the album he was supporting. And it took me becoming a working artist, right? Like there are these 2 huge anthologies that are coming out. They're gonna be really big anthologies that I have poems in. And I'm already wanting to read new poems that I've written, but we got these promo dates. So I got to go and read the poems that's in this big, and it's a really historical anthology thing, right? So just on my little small thing, just looking at how quickly Prince shifted gears, I think having Act 1 and Act 2, right, together, it will be another testament of just how prolific he was, that by the end of this thing, he was already something else and on to something else. But I do want to echo that I'm with you on this. I'm with you. Don't want to run the risk, and I'll say it because y'all are too nice to say it. When I say y'all, everybody else on this panel, I ain't gonna never work for nobody damn body anyway. That's why I retired. If the estate bonds Diamonds and Pearls and Love Symbol album, everybody who works for the estate is fucking stupid, and they will lose all credibility of Prince scholarship. They will lose all credibility of anybody respecting them. And they will then prove the thing that we've all been saying, that they've been denying, that they're really only concerned with 3 brief years of Prince's life. And they don't have the intellect or the knowledge to be the people who keep alive the legacy of Prince. Don't send your mail or your emails to D'Angela. Send them the psychedelic literature. I'm here all damn day for the smoke. You do not want some of this Clarksdale, Mississippi, Muddy Waters, W.C. Handy, Sam Cooke, and Ike Turner too, damn it. I make your ass eat cake. So bring the smoke to me if that's what you want to do. That is not, the views here is not of Polysolid, not of hashtag SexyMF30 years. This is straight Liegh McInnis saying, if you combine Diamonds and Pearl and Love Symbol, you have lost your damn mind and no one will ever respect you.
Hey man, tell us how you really feel though. Just
I think
Go ahead.
I think that from a marketing standpoint, and let me be clear, I'm not eating no cake, so I definitely agree with Steve Liegh. But from a marketing standpoint, and other box sets have been doing this, you can have the King Kong Super Deluxe with the stuff we want, and you can have like a smaller pared down one for people who like dip their toe in and say, well, let me get a little taste of this, a little taste of that. And for marketing, that just means more sales. So, we're happy and the casual fan is happy. So it's a good thing all the way around.
On behalf of the Prince fans, the delegation, I nominate Liegh to be our spokesperson to go like to the estate and Rick James slap some people
All right.
Okay, cue up the Billy Sparks. Man, Deanna, okay. This is a business.
There's a business.
All right. Okay. So I have to thank you. I've been putting on and off my headphones, so my hair looks a little crazy, but that's okay. And I would like to thank you for spirited conversation as always. As you know, we could talk about this all day long for 6 Saturdays in a row, like we did for the Sign of Time Super Deluxe celebration after salons. So I am grateful for each and every one of you because Prince Live is so important to talk about. In addition to Prince studio recordings, I think Prince Live is also very, very important. We are at the end of our 2 days. However, we're not quite finished. We're going to take like a short 5-minute bio break, and Arthur and I are going to come together in a last session to reflect on today. And if anyone wants to come up on the stage and share any memories about their favorite symposia, favorite moment, we happy to have you. And if you don't want to do that, like you didn't want to do it last night, I'll come out to the lounge and talk to some of you to say hello. And it's just been a really wonderful 2 days, but I'm going to start talking about that in the next section so I can let these guys go because they've already given us so much of their time today. So thank you, Liegh, for moderating. Thank you, each and every one of you on the panel, for your energy and love of Prince Live, because that's where it's at.